Hi there, I'm the reviewer that most people call the Captain, and I'm here to give an in-depth analysis and special review on the new Disney movie, Lemonade Mouth. Lemonade Mouth, a movie about 5 very different teens that come from different backgrounds and come together to make a band while they're in high school. Now, the basic premise and summary of this movie may sound very simple and very predictable, but this movie is actually much more complex and much more interesting than it might seem at face value. Now, for this special review of mine, I'm not just going to say, oh, that part of the movie was good, that part was bad. I'm actually going to spend quite some time talking about the very interesting topics that this movie brings up. But before all that, let's talk about where Lemonade Mouth probably got some of its inspiration. When I was watching the beginning of this movie, I started thinking about the Brat Pack movies of the 80s. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, basically, back in the 80s, there were a lot of movies about teenage characters that, well, met up in places like detention, just like in Lemonade Mouth, and they began realizing that despite the fact that they're different, they are kind of the same. Plus, in these 80s teenage films, the characters began realizing that their parents and, well, some of their educators were somewhat wrong in what they expected them to do with their lives. So in a sense, these teenage characters begin rebelling against authority and begin following, well, their own dreams. The thing is, most of these 80s Brat Pack movies were rated PG-13 and rated R. Lemonade Mouth, however, is rated G, of course. So this movie, even though it's about teenagers, is actually something that all ages can watch. And I'm actually glad it does, because this movie brings some very important issues that I would like to see parents discuss with their young children. Now, to give some of the plot away, here's what we notice in the beginning of the movie. The school that the movie focuses on begins giving a lot of extra attention to the sports program. Why? Well, because the school just got a lot of money from a new sports drink company known as Turbo Blast. Think, well, Gatorade or Powerade. The sports drink company gives the school a lot of money for a new gymnasium. And of course, the principal's very excited about a new gymnasium because, in his own words,
sports bring donors, donors bring money, and money makes my school run.
Now, don't get me wrong, getting money for the school is important. But when you're starting to get money for the school and forgetting about the needs of your other students, that's where we have a problem. You see, in this movie, the principal moves all the extracurricular activities to the school basement and gives them very poor working conditions to be in.
You're telling me Brennigan just stuck your clubs in the basement?
Pretty much. Unless you're wearing a varsity jacket or a cheer skirt around here, you're basically
invisible.
Now, when you're watching this movie, you might think the principal is unrealistically mean. And while the way he's portrayed is a little silly and over the top, but here's the thing. It's actually a pretty realistic decision that the principal makes in terms of preferring sports over other activities at the school. There are a ton of high schools and many colleges out there that really give lots and lots of extra attention to the sports programs. School concerts and school plays can bring in some money, but not as much as sports programs. So here's where we have a great discussion piece. Is it worth it to give extra attention to sports programs just because they bring in more money for the education system? Well, my answer is, maybe you should give a little more attention to the program that can bring in a little extra money for the school system. But if you start treating one group of students like they're more special than the other, that's where you kind of have a problem. But in this movie, basically everybody that's not part of the sports program gets virtually neglected.
No, guys, you keep doing this wrong.
And since we're on the topic of school, let's talk about something that also happens pretty early on in the movie. In the beginning of this movie, the principal has a very strict idea of how this school should be run and how every single student should act.
But I'm afraid that shirt is...
What? Is there a dress code here?
And if any student kind of goes outside of his idea of what a perfect student looks like, he gets pretty upset, and he gives detentions left and right to students that don't sit the way he wants them to sit. There's one scene early on in the movie that gets me pretty upset, but is actually pretty realistic. One of the lead female characters in the movie, named Olivia, is a pretty shy and isolated student. She's so shy and isolated that she decides to start eating lunch in the school closet. However, the principal finds her in the closet, and because he doesn't like a student is eating in a non-designated area, he sends her to detention. Now, if I were an educator and I found a teen by themselves in a closet eating in there, I'd be worried. I'd start thinking, why is this teen in a closet by herself? Is there something going wrong at home? Is she becoming very depressed? Is she so depressed that she's going to start hurting herself? These are the things I would start thinking about. I wouldn't start thinking, she's not sitting where I want her to sit, I'm going to send her to detention. The thing is, there are teachers out there like this. There are teachers that get so mad when a student is not sitting where they're supposed to sit that they automatically send them to detention. Now granted, there are many teachers that don't act like this. Let me first say, I think there are many smart educators out there. And I think the majority of educators would not act like this principal. The thing is, there are teachers out there that act like this principal. It's my hope that educators will watch this movie and begin thinking twice about why they're giving out a detention slip. Are they giving that detention slip out because the child is breaking a rule? Or are they giving that detention slip out because the child is not fitting their own personal idea of how a student should act in the school? Now, early on in the movie, there's one character that really begins to rebel against authority named Stella. She gets pretty mad early on when the principal tells her she can't wear a shirt that says question authority. Now, let's think about this. Her shirt says question authority. She's not saying down with authority. She's not saying let's destroy the establishment. She's just saying question authority. And that's not exactly a bad thing. I think it's good to question those that are in authority over you, as long as you do it in an appropriate way. The thing is, in this movie they show a few good examples of how to question authority, and they show a few bad examples on purpose. For example, Stella actually interrupts an entire assembly just to make her voice heard.
My shirt, my decision. Okay, don't let your school take away your rights. Okay, be heard. Use your voice.
Now, even though what she says is not inappropriate, the fact that she interrupts the principal in the middle of a school assembly, that is inappropriate. But let's talk more about some of the other characters. We've already mentioned Olivia and Stella. Now, there's one teenage guy in this movie called Wen. Early on in the movie, it's revealed that Wen's parents are divorced and his father's starting to date a very young woman.
Don't you think it's a little weird that your girlfriend's still in college? She's 28, Wen. She's just taking a photography course.
Now, Wen's questions are actually very relevant. Is it right for a guy in his late 30s, or maybe this guy's in his 40s, to be dating a woman that's in her 20s? I don't actually have an answer for this. It kind of depends on the situation, but it's still good to see a young teenager actually questioning his father's choices and who he's dating in kind of a peaceful way. And then we have a girl in the movie who's nicknamed Mo, and she kind of has an interesting family situation.
That lipstick you're wearing?
No, Baba.
Because you're too young for that sort of thing.
Her parents are immigrants from India, and her father has a very strict view on how his daughter should act.
I didn't come to this country and make the sacrifices I made just so that you can throw it all away on boys and rock bands?
Charlie is just a friend, okay?
Now here's where we get another good discussion piece. Should a parent be super strict in every little detail of how their teenager child lives their life? Well, all I'm going to say on this is, theoretically, if a parent raises their teenager well before high school, then they should assume that the child is going to make some good decisions because, well, that's how they raise them, to make good decisions. If a teenager's been taught by their parent to make good decisions, then theoretically they will. But moving on to our last character is Charlie.
Your mother
We?
thought you might like to have this with you today. For luck.
It was your brother's.
And while this family situation may seem cliche, it's actually not far from how many parents treat some of their children. Some parents have a very specific view on how their children should act. And it creates a lot of pressure for the teenager when they can't meet those expectations or refuse to follow them at all.
I don't want to play soccer, I don't want your abuse, and I certainly don't want my brother's ball.
But moving on with the plot, these 5 different teenagers finally meet up in detention about 20 minutes into the movie. And after a little bit of time, the teacher leaves detention for a little bit because, well, she doesn't like the fact that her music room is in the school basement. So once the 5 teenagers are left alone in this music room, they start just chilling, and then they eventually start jamming. Now here's the part of the movie where you might start saying, oh no, the movie has become High School Musical. Well, not exactly. While it is rare for 5 people that have never met each other to start jamming together very well, I've actually seen people who have just met each other that were musically gifted start jamming, and they were actually really good together. It's rare, but it does happen. Plus, unlike High School Musical, nobody really breaks out into some well-choreographed dance. They just start, well, playing instruments and start moving around. The way these teenagers just jump around and dance, it really feels like normal teenagers jumping around and dancing while singing a song they like. Now to explain the next piece of the plot in as few words as I can, the teens after jamming together eventually decide to make a band. Whenever they practice at school, they also like drinking lemonade out of the lemonade machine in the school basement. Eventually, the teens realize that the lemonade machine is going to be moved because, as we said earlier on, the school made a special deal with the sports drink company known as Turbo Blast. Meaning all vending machines that don't sell Turbo Blast must go. While the whole Lemonade Matters thing might seem very minor, the whole Lemonade Matters thing is actually meant to parallel the fact that people who don't play sports in life also matter too. I mean, we live in a society where sports stars are given a whole lot of attention. So there are some people who don't play sports that might feel like, well, that they're kind of worthless compared to a sports star. And speaking of feeling worthless, let's talk about how the character Olivia in the movie feels. As I said earlier, Olivia is a pretty shy and isolated girl, and eventually it's revealed in the movie that she only lives with her grandmother, and she has a pet cat who's very old.
So, you're Olivia's friend.
That's right.
I've never met one of Olivia's friends before.
Wow, that is an old cat.
Nancy was my mom's, and so she's just kind of like the last real thing I have left her, so.
Well, what about your dad?
Can we just work on the songs?
Now, if you already didn't know, Olivia is played by actress Bridget Mendler. Now, I'm sure Disney put her in this movie because they wanted to use this movie as a rising star vehicle for her so that she could become the next big music star for Disney. The thing is, though, she's actually a really good actress. There are actually some really great emotional scenes in this movie that I think she does phenomenal at. And of course, her co-star Adam Hicks, I'm sure this movie was also meant to be a rising star vehicle for him as well, is also really good in this movie. And Bridget Mendler and Adam Hicks together are, well, good together in this movie.
I can't take it. That's what being friends about.
What's great about this movie is these characters are not just a bunch of G-rated musical singer characters. They actually have some pretty complex backgrounds.
Oh, my dad's in prison. I'm too humiliated to talk to him or about him, and I don't know what to say. I mean, he's made some really bad decisions since my mom died, and I still love him, but he's a stranger now, you know?
And this movie isn't all about just going against authority. For example, Mo in the movie actually finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her, and as a way to help herself move on, she sings this song about how her old self is gone and she's become a new person. Well, what I like about this movie is these are not over-the-top singers. They are not doing a super choreographed dance to every single song. They're just playing their instruments, singing, and having a good time. And of course, I think many can agree with me that the best song in the movie would definitely be this one. All in all, this movie has a very great story. I will say one of my complaints about the story, though, was about 2/3 of the way into the movie, things just started getting worse for the band for no apparent reason. Suddenly, at the same time, all of these random accidents happened to the band members. But still, during these scenes where things just started getting worse for the band members, there still were some amazing scenes in the movie, like this.
You have a family! Your dad, your sister, Sydney! I don't even remember my mom. I haven't talked to my dad in years, and you have the nerve to feel sorry for yourself?
I don't want to reveal too much about the end of the movie, that way you'll actually go watch it yourself and be surprised. But I will say, yeah, there are some surprises that happen near the end of the movie. Not everything turns out the way you expect. All in all, Lemonade Mouth is an amazing movie. It has great actors, fun music, and it brings up some pretty important social issues that you can use as a great time to discuss with people that are watching the movie with you. And I'm not just talking about parents talking with children. I mean, I can imagine young adults or teachers watching this movie with their friends and using this as a great time to examine what they're doing with their life.
It's not perfect, but it's okay.
Yeah, well, perfect when way overrated.
It is just rare nowadays to find a great movie that can be used as a great thought-provoking discussion piece for so many ages and yet be a fun movie all at the same time. So that's my insightful review on Lemonade Mouth. I hope you enjoyed my review, and I hope you enjoyed the movie a whole lot more.